So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Like I said, this is our most attended session, so this is really exciting. We've been hosting these coach socialization series since the beginning of isolation, so since mid-March, and we will be continuing to do so for the duration of this social/physical distancing period. So we hope that you all have been enjoying these and have been catching up on the ones that have been on YouTube, and will participate in our future sessions as well. So we created this series with an intent to provide a platform for coaches to connect and to continue to learn from each other, but also from a variety of professionals. So tonight we have Len Harvey here with us, and he is the head coach of the women's basketball team at Acadia University. And tonight he's going to be talking to us about building a culture and how to keep it positive and competitive. And Len has a lot to offer in terms of this subject and just coaching in general. So during the presentation, we will ask that you keep to the group chat if you have any questions, and then at the end, we'll open it up for an open Q&A discussion. So without further ado, Len, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, thanks to you guys for inviting me on. It's been, yeah, it's really kind of cool, and I don't know. I see about, there's 51 people, so minus me, I think 50 people have some better ideas with this stuff. So I'm not too sure everything I've got to offer here, but hopefully there's some little pieces that you can pull out and apply to your own team. There's going to be lots of probably Cape Bretonisms. I can't help it. I see Fabe in here. He's probably going to be one of the only ones who understands what I'm talking about when I throw those out. But yeah, I guess like ultimately probably why I guess I'm asked to talk on this subject is I care about this, in terms of my own coaching. I care about this the most. I think that developing that culture to your team is one of the most important pieces, probably the most important piece. And I think just some of the things that I can challenge us on, and even before we start, is I just kind of ask you if this question is, is your culture, because you have one, regardless of whether you want one or not, you have one, but they're omnipresent for sure. But is it by default or by design? And I think a lot of cultures are by default more than people think they are. We put a lot of stuff on walls, and we say a lot of things, but it's, to me, the thing with culture is it's pure act. So, me thinking of culture, it's the difference maker in teams. I think that it's one of the things that, gives you purpose on a team, and purpose will overrun fear in the moment. So if you have players or any organization that feels a little bit, in the moment where they need to perform and they do feel nervous or fearful, and then that purpose is something that can overrun that fear. And that's why I put so much stock in it. But I've been influenced by a number of people in regards to culture, and too many to list here. There's some of them on the call, to be honest. So it's, I think you just picking and choosing and pulling things from everywhere is really important. But I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and hopefully just, as like Kirsty said, is throw anything into the chat as it's going, even live, and I might see something to jump in on right away. But this is working for me. Yeah. So how do I move this? Got some faces in front of this so I can see it. It's not too bad. Just give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So 4 things when I'm thinking of culture to me, and kind of the primary requirements to understand about elite level culture. I think that you want to really consider the artifacts of your team, and so really with artifacts, I just think of like what's left behind, right? So think of like dinosaur bones, but what's left behind, and that means everything. It's feelings, it's experiences, and experiences aren't just wins. I think we have a lot of that stuff. We talk a lot about that experience when we won that game. It's in sometimes that's true, and sometimes they're definitely part of the experiences. But I know a lot of our players who will often talk more about the trip that they had in an exhibition season or a team building exercise that we did. And so those types of artifacts that your team leaves behind are really, really important. And ultimately, how do people feel when they're around your team? So it could be your team, specifically your players, but I think it's even more than that. It's beyond that. It's the people that touch your program every day, but it could even be, it's your program can be a bit of a magnet, and we want to do that here in our area, but we want to make it a magnet for the community. We want people to be around our team and feel pulled to it and feel really good when they leave any interaction with us. So I think that speaks big time to your culture, is your artifacts that you leave behind. The attitude of your team, it's, attitude's dynamic. It's definitely a choice, and it's your job as the coach, I think, to create and cultivate that team attitude. We talk about it again. It's things that are on the walls, and attitude is often talked about, but it's often a big issue. It's often one of the prime issues that pop up when you think about people who are struggling with what they perceive as issues with their culture. It's often attitude that it keeps coming back to. So, and the encouragement I have there is just like, what reflection are you giving to your team, and if you want your team to display a certain type of attitude, whatever that might be, what are they seeing in that mirror that you are as the coach? What are they looking at every day, and are they seeing the same thing? Which leads into the next point, which is authenticity. So I have my own different theories on authentic leadership. I've been lucky to be around a lot of authentic leaders, and they're really, really strong and I guess comfortable in their own skin. It took me a while. I think I'm still growing into it and trying to figure out who you are, but I think that you have to be really careful, especially now in the social media age. Like, you can find so many things, you can find so many activities, you can find so much stuff out there, but you can't take a shotgun approach with your culture. You can't just throw everything at the wall and have no design to it. And I think that's a little bit of what happens. We see something that's kind of cool, or look at what Michigan State football does, or Coach K at Duke does this, or the All Blacks do this, and I think we just kind of throw it at the wall without really considering it, thinking like, yeah, that works for them. It works for Eddie Jones, or it works for Mike Krzyzewski, but like, does that work for me? It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you have to have your own thing. And as a coach, or as any type of a leader, you better not be a phony. People just see right through that. And that's one of the big culture killers, is if they don't believe you. And the last piece for me is the four is the alignment piece. So can you get everybody on the same page, same chapter, same book? It's, we had different challenges with that this season, to be honest. You reflect on your season lots after you finish, and I think at times we got into the same chapter as a group, but we never quite completely got everything and everybody on the same page. And that's tough. But when you get to that elite performance level, I think that is really, really, really at a high level. Your alignment in terms of everybody's beliefs, their behaviors, their experiences are all kind of together. So what does it do? It accelerates your strategy. So that's one big one is I think everybody's probably heard the culture eats strategy for breakfast, but that's all fine. But I think that they can go hand in hand. They can fit together, and culture can really help you execute with speed. And it can really, really accelerate your strategy. I think it attracts people. Like I said before, it's a bit of a magnet. So if you have a great culture, it attracts people to it. And I heard a coach once say that, a lot of people now, we have big mouths, right? Like, everybody has a big mouth, and it's what we need more of is people with big eyes and big ears, and hearing what people have to say about you, or hearing what people experience, I think is important. And when we're talking about attracting people, we also have to be able to listen to when it's, when they're not being attracted, or they're being pushed away. Why is that happening, and what are you willing to change? For any team, you're going to have a million different types of personalities. You're going to have different, races. You're going to have different sexualities. You're going to have, a lot of different differences in your team. And culture is a good one because it can align groups. It's not about making everybody the same. That's pointless. And, there's really no reason to do that. It's not about, taking away individuality. I think you've got to try and value individuality, but then align everybody into the same, common experiences, trying to get them in the common beliefs, and so that you can drive some common behaviors. And then the big one is it earns wins. It's funny, but people don't talk about that as much. Like we get a little airy fairy with this stuff and say we want to have great team building activities, and that's great. And they are drivers. So like all of that stuff is a driver. So to me, if I'm running a team building activity, that's fun. And I enjoy it personally, but I also have kind of an end game in mind too. Like I want to drive performance, and, without that connection, without that alignment, I don't think that we're going to perform. So when you get back to it, it's like these types of ideas around culture, they can earn you wins. And that's one of the biggest ones is, the age old one is, how do you spell fun? And it's WIN. And I think that's something that people just are a little nervous to say. But if you're a competitor, I think you want to get into that situation where if you're going in, you want to win. So that can, elite culture can certainly help you win. So things to acknowledge, and I hopefully won't go over time, because I do want to kind of chat a little bit about this stuff and bat some of these concepts around, to be honest. But there's some interesting thoughts around this stuff. And so one of them is people are like water, and they'll fit into whatever container you pour them into. I think you can fit the beliefs and behaviors and experiences into a certain container, but you have to really consider what that container is going to look like. People have a natural tendency to want to be part of something. They are not going to, you're going to have far more people who are going to want to be part of something than they are going to want to just kind of go off on solo missions. And that's the joy of coaching team sports, I think. And, one of the challenges I'm always fascinated with coaches of, more individualized sports, how they can create culture, because I think it will be a lot more challenging, to be honest. But social loafing is something to really acknowledge with teams and with anybody now. That diffusion of responsibilities it's really real. So when you think about it, everybody always talks about, on a team, it's 1 + 1 = 3, or 1 + 1 = 5, and we're going to have all this power. We're going to be great together, and it's going to be like, the Power Rangers. We get together and we're going to, be more powerful than ever before. That's possible. But more often than not, and particularly without any guidance, or if you're just kind of, your culture is by default, you're going to have a lot of 1 + 1 = 1.5. And that diffusion of responsibility, that idea of like, okay, we're together, so I don't have to do this quite as much or quite as hard. I'm not on this stage. The spotlight's not on me. I can kind of take this back a notch. That's real. And it's something that you have to, if you want to have a really competitive culture, you've got to find ways around that. You've got to find ways to confront that. If you permit that, you're going to have real problems. And I think that's something just to keep in mind when you think of like the position that people start in, like that default position. So if you're going to default your culture to something, or just to the natural way that things are, that people are generally going to be more apt to just kind of give a little bit less than they could at the beginning. We do an activity at the start of every year. It'd be a good one for any of you guys to do too, is we just ask them to put their hands up, and, we say, put your hands up as high as you can put them up. And, everybody kind of puts their hands up and say, well, okay, put them up an inch higher. And then they put them up an inch higher, and say, well, okay, put them up an inch higher than that. Okay. And we kind of do that 4 or 5 times. And they get to a point where they're like standing on their tiptoes, or they're actually really at their highest point. And the question ultimately is like, well, why didn't you do that the first time? The question, we asked you to put your hands up as high as you can put them up. Most people won't give you full effort the first time that you ask for it. And so you have to be really conscious of that. I think this comes back to this, the competitiveness for me is this being serious versus having fun. A lot of kids in 2020 really struggle with those two concepts and marrying them together and keeping them together. They're not mutually exclusive things. You have to be able to, approach things in a serious manner, but it's like having fun doesn't mean that it's not fun if it's not goofy, or we're not goofing around and we're not just jokey with each other all the time. But then on the other hand, being serious doesn't mean that you're a total nutcase as a coach, or, you know, even as a player. Like you can't, you have to find some way to marry those two concepts, and understand that they're a little bit different. The perspectives for everybody are a little bit different, but I think that's one that can drive competitiveness, is figuring out, you know, for instance, like we have different players on our team, and I know that some of them are probably a little bit more in line with being serious and, you know, really getting after it. And that's where their performance is going to be the best. But we have some others that they need to, you know, they need a little bit less of the real serious, you know, A-type way of doing things. And they need to, you know, at least appear or feel like they're having more fun with it. And those types of things they're interesting to me when I watch different people, because at the end of the day, your culture, you're just trying to drive behaviors to drive your performance. So are you going to cut your nose off to spite your face because you think that this is how practice should look, or you think that this is how every player should act? And I think that those are some things that you have to really take time to consider. Of, you know, I guess, you know, an old one was just like, which hills are you going to die on? And figuring those things out. And then having discipline, because discipline's not punitive, discipline's not punishment. And a question that I'd have for you guys is, and it's you know, it's just something to consider. It's not something to really even answer quickly. It's to take some time to consider it. But like, how do you handle discipline in your program? And that's going to be different for all of us. But, and again, it has to be authentic. It has to be, you know, it has to be rational. It has to be real. But I think that we have to think about, like, how do we handle discipline? What are the things that are going to come up 100%, that they're going to, you know, crop up as a coach in 2020 and beyond? And what are the ways that we're going to handle that? I've found personally that athletes in 2020, and just generally people in 2020, they don't respond as much to punitive things. Like they respond more to, you know, to be honest, a little bit of peer pressure. They respond more to, you know, putting them in competitive environments. They respond more to figuring out like how that their behavior impacts other people. Yeah, I have found that the punitive thing, like just making everybody run, or you're gonna, I don't know, you're gonna kick them out, or you're gonna do this or that or the other thing. Like, those are bullets in your gun, and you only have so many of them in that gun every year. So if you're gonna be punitive coach all the time, you're gonna run out of ammo pretty fast. They need to be, you know, for bigger moments. And so how are you gonna handle discipline if you're not gonna just rely on punishment all the time? I think that's something that's really important. So where to start? I think, and this could be wrong, but this is where I've started for a while, is I think that you start with identity. A lot of people will start with, you know, we want to start with goals, or we want to start with measurable things, and and those are fine too. It's you know, it's that strategy, but I really think that you should start with identity. I think that you can give them identity before they have to earn it, which means it's a really good place to start. I think you get to create some opportunities, some really false ones, and some, you know, they're manufactured by you to build identity so early on, and then you can kind of create some momentum. Because without adversity, like adversity is the catalyst for everything. Like, adversity is the catalyst for your culture. And if you're the only thing, especially early on, that's creating adversity, you're going to probably struggle with relationships, and that becomes an issue. So it is about creating an identity, and then letting some of the adversity happen naturally. I think that's going to happen no matter what. Like, you know, all of you coaches know that that's going to come no matter what you do. So, and then it comes back to the mirror again too, is so your image or identity and how you want to project yourself to the world, it is important. And for 2020 athletes, like, it's becoming more and more important. We keep talking about social media and we keep talking about these things, but, you know, you got to come up with solutions around it. And one of the things that I think that, you know, student athletes and people generally, to be honest, are really hyper concerned with is that image. So change how they think about the identity. Like, what are you projecting to the world, and how is that important? You know, how do you want to be projected to the world? And so then you kind of ask the question, like, why not culture first? but culture will drive performance, but I think your identity precedes both of them. Like you have to see yourself a certain way. You have to see yourself as something before you can become something. So that's kind of where I start. And then appreciative inquiry is one that, you know, anybody who's done some stuff with Wade Gilbert, I'm sure that a bunch of you guys have been on with Wade, Atlantic Canadian coaches for sure. But the appreciative inquiry activities of just starting with the question of where we want to go, and not thinking goal oriented, but starting with that question of where do I want to get to? What is the experience? What's the feeling I want to have? And then working backwards from that. Is, you know, it's a really good activity to do for everybody, to be quite honest. We do it often in our program. We don't do big ones. We'll never have ones that are extraordinarily long or, you know, way, you know, months and months in advance. Like we'll be thinking of, you know, here's training camp. You know, what do you want to feel at the end of training camp? If we had a successful training camp, what did it look like? What did it feel like? And then let's work backwards from there. And how did we do that? How did we accomplish that feeling? How did we accomplish that experience? So these are just some concepts of value, I think, to build on. And, you know, I think I'm getting close to my time. But so one thing about authenticity, I think, is really important. You have to live the standards that you're setting. So you can't be a hypocrite ever. So if you're not willing to, you know, if you want to be somebody who drills fitness, and like you have to be fit, like you have to be willing to get out and do some of that stuff. You have to be able to do it. Otherwise, I don't know if you step into that. Like, I don't know if you lean into that as much. You know, whatever it is that your standards are, you have to make sure that you're doing it. You know, you don't tell them to not smoke cigarettes and you go out and have a smoke at, you know, after the game. Like that's where I get to. It's an extreme example, but there are subtleties to that. And I think that it's eventually those types of things leave little cracks and they chip away at your authenticity, your reputation as a leader, if you're not living those standards. Truth over harmony is one that, you know, I heard from Mike McKay years and years ago, that it's a great way to, you know, live your program is to tell them the truth. And I do believe in that. I think that, you know, having truth over harmony is really important in the long run. But then at the same time, I think you have to be careful about leaving scars on your players. I think that, you know, truth over harmony, I said I wasn't going to swear, but I have to on this one a little bit, because my vocabulary is not big enough. But like truth over harmony doesn't give you license to just be an asshole. And I think that people miss that, and we all do. Like I do too. Like we'll tiptoe on that line and we'll say something, and I do that. You know, I'll do that 5 times a season where I'm just like, oh geez, like, did I really say that? I got to go and talk to her after this. But if you're not truthful, especially as the athletes get a little bit better, they get a little bit older, if you're not truthful, they're not going to listen to you. If you're not adding value to them and you're not giving them truthful feedback, they're not going to listen to you. They'll probably cater to you and they'll still act like they are, but they're not listening to you. When it really matters, they're going to go to the person who tells them the truth. And that's important. So you can be truthful without being hurtful. And that's something it's really important. Like, don't leave scars on your players. We're really careful. Like, I'm an intense coach for sure. I'm a competitive coach, as you know, all of you guys would be. And I don't say much after games. You know, I really try and keep it short and sweet. And, you know, I'm very, very measured and careful about what I say, and particularly after losses. We have to be really careful in those moments. So, now the other one is, so the next piece is courageous conversations. I think like having the idea of, I think words are important, and how you use them and when you use them. But so everybody would say like tough conversations, difficult conversations. I think the idea of having courageous conversations is important, because courage requires fear and love. You know, it might be that you fear having the conversation, but you love the team, or you love being a part of it. And we talk about having courage to have conversations and stepping into some of these things. I think and in this stage, from my experience, anyway, I'd be curious to hear some of yours, is that like the courage is actually lacking in terms of players addressing, having courageous conversations with each other. I think that they're more apt to, have a conversation with a coach at times, but there's a few different reasons for this stuff. You can't blame it all on parents, but we'll say a lot of it, I guess at times, is I just don't think a lot of kids have had to have courageous conversations in their lives, really. And then they hit a certain point where it's their time to be independent and do these things on their own, and they really struggle. So we teach a lot of that, is just to have courage and have courageous conversations, and understand that they're not going to go sideways. I think that's something as a coach that you can manage, is even when a player has a conversation that is difficult, to be able to, work them through it as an adult is a really great one. Another one for us is you get to their heart space first. So you won't get to their head without getting to their heart. And thinking of heart, like Latin, in Latin, it's the translation is core, right? So it's like what's core to you and what's core to them. And you have to figure that out, and you have to kind of get to that heart space. If you do, we're blessed in a lot of cases, as at our stage, is we get to have 4 or 5 years with people. So you can take your time a bit and work your way through getting to that heart space, but you do want to accelerate it as much as you can. I know others maybe are in shorter seasons, or you're trying to figure something out inside of a provincial team season, or a few months where you can get yourself sorted out. So but I don't think that you'll get to their head without getting to their heart. Then appreciative inquiry, it is such a great activity. Honestly, it's we've done it for years. We've done it, right before we've gone into AUS championships. Let's say that we're playing on a Friday. We would do an activity like this the weekend prior. So again, it's not in September for March. It's like this week. So what do you want to feel? Okay, well, I want to feel like we're standing on a stage and we're holding a banner, and I want to get this, and I want to have that feeling. I want to have that like exhausted feeling of winning a championship. Okay. So what are all the things that we did between now and then to get ourselves to that point, to get ourselves to that feeling? And again, it's not as goals oriented. It's more based around experiences. It's based around feelings. And I think those types of things really drive behavior. And it's in shorter time periods. So you can always go back to it. It's on Wednesday when you're having practice and it's not going just how it should be going. Hey guys, like we talked about this Saturday, right? Like what were some of the behaviors that we talked about that we're going to have to drive this thing if we want that feeling on Sunday that we were talking about? Okay, we need this, and this. Are we doing that? No, we're not doing that right now. Okay, let's move forward. Let's get better, right? And I think that these types of things, it requires involving your athletes in it, not being the one that's directing it and telling them how it's going to go. And a lot of coaches struggle with their ego on that one when it comes time to like put rubber to the road and involve their athletes in decisions and let them really own their performances, because it's risky, right? Like who knows what they're going to say. But if you have pre-briefs and debriefs before practices, after practices, before weekends, after weekends, like if you spend time being deliberate about that stuff, you'll have a pretty good idea of what people are going to say and what their emotions are, what they're feeling. And then the final piece for me is just like evaluate and remind them every day. Like we evaluate, we have an actual survey, a player survey every single day that they practice. And I look at them every single day, and we look for patterns, and they'll drive conversations. They'll drive different things, but it forces them to rate themselves in practice. And it's got very little to do with their performance. Most of the time, I think one question on it might involve their performance. The rest of it is, did they have fun? Did they understand what was going on out there? Were they competitive? Were they a good teammate? Like it forces them to evaluate some of the things that we think are core, are part of our heart for our program. And okay, so now you have to think about this today, and you got to rate yourself and your performance in that area as it relates to being a teammate, or being tough or working hard or whatever it is that you value as a program. And then the good thing for them is, and I think it's easy at any level, to be honest, is they know it matters to me because I talk to them about it, and because I bring them up, and because they're part of, you know, any meeting that we might have, or even if I'm just catch them in a hallway, just passing by, and say, oh, gee, yeah, like, you know, what'd you think about that? You know, your score on this, you had it a little low. You know, what were you thinking about that? What was going on? And those types of things really can feed some relationship, you know, some relationship building too. But it keeps coming back to, for me, it's like communication voids are just the death of this stuff. So, and where there's a void in communication, negativity is going to fill that void, like 100%. That's not a team athlete thing. That's just a human thing. Like if somebody's not talking to you, people will assume that they're, not that they're busy, not that they're like whatever, they're going to think, oh, they don't want to talk to me, they're, you know, they're mad at me about something or whatever it is, right? And I think that's something that's really, really important to acknowledge is, you know, over communicate. If that's the thing that your players say about you, is that you're, you know, you communicating too much, or you care so much about it, then there are worse things that they can say about you, most certainly. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. If I can get my cursor to pop up here, I can't do anything there. Yeah, so I'm just a little bit over time, Kirsty, but I tried.
No, that's fine. Keep
Best.
going if you want. Yeah, we definitely have time for like questions though, if anyone wants to ask any questions. I don't know if you can see, Len, in the chat box. There was a couple questions
I
that were
can
asked.
now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sometimes when you're presenting, it doesn't always pop up.
Yeah. Values, you know, values fit in. To me, it's less about those. I think values to me fit in later on. I think that it's an activity that you need to figure out. I've done it a few different ways. I've tried to figure out my own values, and that comes down to like around the container idea. Is like, I think your values actually come into like your container and what you know, where you want to pour your athletes into. But then the other side of values is it can be an activity you do with the players, and you know, you sit down and really get down to business with them. And but again, like to me, is the values of programs more often than not seem to just be on a wall. You know, they're on a wall, they're in a handbook, and they're put away somewhere. Like my challenge to you would be, if you have them for your team, can your team tell you what they are? Like if you've ever had them and they're in a handbook somewhere or they're on a wall somewhere, can your team, if you ask them right now, can they tell you what they are? Again, it's a lot of these types of things. Again, it comes back to your heart, what's on your heart. But to me, it's a lot of this stuff is more about boots on the ground. Like, what is it actually that we're trying to accomplish? How do we put it into action? Because to me, culture is just behavior. It's acting. How do they act? Hopefully that satisfies that one. Identity. Do you and your coaching staff define the identity you want before each season? Are the players involved in setting identity? Both. Yeah, it's both. We've done it different ways. I think the most success that I've had is when I've taken more time myself to be at least the driver of the conversation around it with the athletes, and they've they've usually reinforced some of the things that you're saying, even if you've done a session with them after you've kind of set up some ideas around your identity. But I haven't seen too much that's like brand new, but it's always interesting. You know, we had one of our team leaders came in, it was 2 years ago, and she came in and she said, listen, like, we were running something that I thought was going to become part of our identity tactically. And she came in and just said, like, we hate this. Like, we can't do it. We hate this. Like, we're not going to be able to do this. This is not who we are. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It was, you know, but then again, it's like, do you trust your kids? Like, we could have pounded our heads against the wall for the rest of the year and kept doing that, but are you willing to adjust and adapt? I think that's maybe more important around something like that. Core covenants, yeah, really, really good. Yeah, absolutely. Share anything. Crucial conversations. Yeah. 5 love languages too. It's That's an awesome one. How do you have the players evaluate after practice? We do it on a piece of paper. So I'm old school, tactile. So we have pieces of paper. Our therapist will hand them out after practice. They're super, super skinny, super thin. I think there might be, 6, 7 questions on them. For us, it's one of the most important questions for me, is because I'm just, my wife tells me all the time, like, I miss all the signs. But I have a question at the end of it that just says, do you need to connect? And it's just yes or no. And because sometimes you say like, oh, I have an open door. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm super, I'm super welcoming. But you just might not be. You might say you are, but those moments where do you need to connect with me on something? And they can just circle yes. And then it's a little bit more, throws the ball back in your court. You can do that. You can figure those things out. I'll just boot this up because somebody asked me, what are they? I'll just tell you what they are if I can find them very quickly for you. Post practice. Yeah. So we rate them 1 to 5, and we just say, what was my focus, my energy, my performance, level of a teammate, level of knowledge, level of confidence, my competitiveness, my fun, and then do you need to connect? And it's quick and painless. They drop them off to my office or leave them in the locker room right after practice every day. I throw them into an Excel sheet and away we go. It's really interesting. You can see some of the technical tactical stuff. Like if your confidence was low or their knowledge level was low and it's low across the board, then you can see it's usually your own deal. It's not, it's not their problem, and you can have to adjust, but you can see some common elements statistically across the board with the team. Or you just need to figure out, those moments like my wife says, when I'm missing all the signs, like they have the moment that they can tell you, I need to connect. I need to get in with you. So, it can drive those conversations, which is important for sure. Building a document on culture and values. They immediately get tossed out when performance falls off. Admin feels pressure from stakeholders. Again, it's kind of goes back to like any thoughts on an approach to bridge this gap. Like I think that the paper, like it's important. It's not that it's not important, right, Charles? But I think people look at it. It's my whole problem with leadership in a lot of cases is like, just stop checking boxes. It's not like you can't go into an evaluation or, you're going in with your technical coach or whatever it is. And you say, well, do you have a document? Yeah, we have a document. Do you have a code of conduct? Yeah, we have a code of conduct, but like our players are still assholes. Like, well, then you have a bad culture. Like you haven't fixed the problem. And to me, it's paper and posters on the walls. That stuff is fine, but like ultimately culture is an experience. It's not an explanation, right? Like culture is a total experience, not what you're explaining to them. So you have to be really, really careful about that stuff. I think it's mandatory. I think like you have to have it. You have to have something that they can refer back to. But if you think that the box is checked on September 4th, when, you've gone through your handbook with them, then, you're going to be in for a lot of pain, right? And if your conversations keep going back to in February, well, we talked about this in September, like, are you serious? Like this has to happen every single day. These are conversations in part, like they're part of the fabric of it. It's like my challenge was about what's on the walls. Like if you have values in a book and your players can't tell them to you off the cuff, like right away, these are what we value, or these are our things that are like the major pieces of our program. Like you don't have those things. So it's an experience. It's not an explanation. No, I think I got that. What kind of questions? Was that I think that was the question.
I think it was for the post-practice questionnaire.
And I can share that. Yeah, I don't mind sharing those. I can share those somehow.
I'll be following up with like an email to all the participants just to make sure that they get credit in the locker. So I can just include an attachment or even just a list of the things that you get the athletes to rate.
Yeah, community coach stuff, it's a challenge. It's you know, one of the big challenges, and that's where I feel for you, because like my progression's been super linear. Like I started at mini ball and literally moved up a level the whole way. So I've been in those shoes, and there are things that are a lot easier. Like I'm looking at a few people on here, you know, it's your you know, your Troy Ryan or your Faye McKenzie or your, you know, it's there are some, you know, your John Crosland, like there's some easier ways of putting together some things, because more, it's not that they're all on the same page, but they're closer to it. I think like with community stuff, it's figuring out mostly what that balance is of being serious and having fun. That's a tough one. You're going to have to realize that they're all part of, you know, they're all kind of different in their own ways. One that I used to say was like, find ways to kind of hide the vegetables in the spaghetti sauce was really important for figuring out like those kids that maybe are just happy being there, finding those wins for them, finding those ways for them to really enjoy it and figure out what they value. Like figure out what's important to them. If that's important to them is just being part of the team, well, you got to temper your expectations in a few different areas. I think that we kind of drive some of these people, like if they're happy to be that, then like why beat your head against the wall? It's, you know, you have to try and make it as fun as their experience, as fun as you can. The other kids, like you have to make their experience as fun as you can, because for them, maybe being serious and taking it, you know, pretty getting after it and stuff is fun. So you got to find ways to kind of bridge that gap and meet that in the middle a little bit. I think sometimes at the community level, we spend so much time thinking of like high performance and like, I've got to get all the kids to the top layer and the, you know, I got to bring the bottom kids up to the top. I think sometimes it's about, you know, maybe a little bit more moderation and you know, bringing some of that stuff into the middle a bit and keeping the main thing with those guys is having fun, right? That's the biggest piece for sure. I think I got them, Kirsty.
Yeah, I think that was everything in the chat box. And does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves or write it in the chat box, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I figure I'll just ask one more question here. I'm wondering, again, I was the community coach there that chimed in, and just wondering if you have any ideas or thoughts about younger players getting involved in setting that culture and what that looks like, because I hear that you're relying a lot on their input, which is great. And I mean, I look for that as well at the younger ages, but just, I guess, the seriousness level of incorporating that at the younger ages.
Yeah, so I think you can still. I think it's probably even more important at those younger ages to try and involve them in that process, and then coming back to some, you know, some identity activities. But then to go to the other point, it's like, you know, what are the things that are valued that maybe aren't even sports related? Like, what are the things that you could, you know, you'd be valued if you were a basketball player, but then you're running off to hockey practice, and then you're running off to soccer practice. Like, what are some of these universal truths that are going to hold true across the ages? And I think that's something that's important. And I think they can be really involved in kind of I think it'd be really fun with those ages to do some kind of cool self-discovery stuff and getting them to think of discipline in terms of like their own ownership over some things. And, you know, this is, you know, it's not necessarily about owning their performance necessarily, but, you know, you're owning your attitude and, you know, you're owning your behavior and what does that look like? And, you know, I think those things could be really, really powerful with younger kids, just as much as the older kids, to be honest. But yeah.
Okay, great. Any last minute questions? All right.
That's good. I didn't even swear that much, Kirsty. It's perfect.
No, it was great. When you were preparing us for the swear word, I thought you were going to drop something worse. So thank you everyone for attending. Like I said, this is our most attended session. So really appreciate you guys all coming out tonight. Or this, I guess, late afternoon for those coming from the Pacific side of our country. But thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Len, for an awesome presentation. This was great. As mentioned, I will follow up with everyone, and I'll include a list of those post-practice questions. And if anyone has any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. And please check out our previous YouTube videos as well. We have all of our past sessions recorded and posted on our coaches channel. So it's Canadian Sports Center Atlantic -coaches channel. So you can check them all out there. And our next session is at the same time tomorrow night with a mental performance consultant named Kina, who's going to be discussing how to boost athletes' beliefs in themselves. So this would be a really good one to kind of support everything that was mentioned tonight. So definitely check that out tomorrow evening. And thank you everyone for attending. And again, if your name isn't in your username, please either send me a direct message to make sure you get credit in the locker. And someone just asked if tomorrow is full. No, it's not. We can have up to 100 people, I believe, and we have about the same as registered as tonight. So as long as you're registered in the locker, you should get in. All right, I'm just gonna see if there's any other questions.
Thanks, everybody. I'll put my email in with Kirsty's too, so feel free if you need anything at any point in time ever. Lots of resources and stuff, and even just to chat or anything about this stuff, I'm always enjoy it. So yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Great, thank you. And there's some questions going on here. Tomorrow night's session, so every one of our sessions uses the exact same Zoom code. So as long as you know the time, just keep in mind that it is Atlantic Standard Time. It's the same Zoom link and code, so you can access all of our future presentations. The only reason you won't get in is if we max out at 100, and if that does happen, we record the session, so you'll be able to watch it. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. I think that was all that got asked. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kirsty.